Our top stories tonight. Hoping for a single Korea one day, South Korean government ministries and agencies discuss ways to reunite the divided peninsula. A growing number of startups in Korea seem to be getting extra leverage in the battle against dominant conglomerates thanks to greater government support. Various reports suggest a Korean teenager that went missing in Turkey might have joined the Islamic State in Syria. These stories and more coming up on Early Edition at 6.
It's 6 p.m. on a Monday here in Korea. Good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che.
And I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Welcome to Early Edition at 6.
Well, the South Korean government has many things on its to-do list when it comes to reunifying the two Koreas, right?
And on Monday, the related diplomatic ministries rolled up its sleeves in their efforts to better prepare for a possible future reunification. Our Hwang Sang-hee starts us off.
In the 70th year after the division of the Korean peninsula, the Unification Ministry wants to launch a new era of reunification. Various events with North Korea are part of the plan, including a test run of a railway across the inter-Korean border around Liberation Day in August. The train will take off from Seoul and make stops at the North Korean border town of Kaesong and the capital Pyongyang before its final stop at Sinuiju. Sound unrealistic? Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae says the ministry has all the data it needs.
There will need to be discussions between South and North Korea on the issue, but once North Korea agrees, I think the project won't be hard to carry out.
In its talks with the North, South Korea is seeking fundamental solutions to humanitarian issues like reunions for war-separated families. It's also willing to discuss more aid to Pyongyang. The idea includes the construction of multiple farm complexes in North Korea and training for its workers.
We are planning to extend development assistance to North Korea to help it build the groundwork for autogenic capability.
To ensure these reunification efforts will continue past the current administrations, the government plans to introduce new legislation. This includes training personnel to prepare for reunification and designating officials at each government ministry. But most of these plans need the cooperation of North Korea, which is still sitting on South Korea's month-old offer for talks. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And in response to those plans, President Park Geun-hye says now is the time for the two Koreas to start discussing preparations for a peaceful unification. She then called on officials to find ways to bring North Korea into a dialogue. Pyongyang has yet to respond to Seoul's proposal for talks on inter-Korean issues, including the resumption of reunions for families separated by the Korean War. President Park then emphasized South Korea should also take the lead in working with the global community to denuclearize the North. Meanwhile, South Korea plans to continue its push to denuclearize the Korean peninsula while improving relations with Japan. South Korea's foreign ministry laid out these plans during a press conference on Monday. Our Connie Kim reports.
Denuclearizing the Korean peninsula and mending bilateral ties between South Korea and Japan are the main goals for South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry this year. At a press briefing on Monday, Foreign Affairs Minister Yoon Byung-se emphasized that the government will create a system in which inter-Korean talks and denuclearizing the Korean peninsula can work hand in hand. South Korea has vowed to find ways to deter provocations from North Korea. This will be driven by a so-called Korean formula that aims to denuclearize North Korea and revive the six-party nuclear talks stalled since 2008. The formula consists of methods and preconditions for restarting the multilateral talks based on the agreements reached by the nations party to the talks, including the two Koreas, China, Japan, Russia, and the US. The nations have agreed on the need for a swift denuclearization process and creative ways to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table. Seoul's foreign ministry also outlined plans for addressing one of the most contentious issues for the South: the wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women by Japan. Minister Yoon emphasized that he hopes to see improved bilateral ties between South Korea and Japan, as this year marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries. Adding that the high-level talks on wartime sex slave could bring about a change in their bilateral relations, Minister Yoon said Seoul hopes to see some of the changes coming from the Japanese government. Korea wants Japan to properly compensate the victims of sexual enslavement. Japan claims the issue was resolved through a 1965 bilateral treaty. And to narrow their differences, a Korean and Japanese delegation are in Tokyo for talks on the issue. Resolving the issue was a precondition for the first summit between President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, North Korea is saying there will be no family reunions unless South Korea removes the sanctions it imposed on the North. It's talking about the economic sanctions that Seoul imposed on Pyongyang after the North torpedoed a South Korean warship in 2010. According to its propaganda website, the North criticized the South for holding military drills with the United States and letting activists fly anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border. Saying that the ball is in South Korea's court, the website said the two Koreas will be able to resolve the issue of family reunions and improve inter-Korean relations only when such preconditions are met. And despite the tough times that South Korean firms in Kaesong Industrial Complex have had to go through over the years, data is showing that listed companies there have actually been doing quite well. To tell us how this was possible, here's our Kim Min-ji.
Listed South Korean firms with operations at the Kaesong Industrial Complex have been faring well despite inter-Korean relations blowing hot and cold over the years. According to the Corporate Association of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, the company's average sales rose nearly 120% between 2005 and 2013. Their operating profits also jumped more than 140% over the same period. This translates into a compound annual growth rate of about 10% in terms of sales and 12% in operating profit. South Korean firms entered the Kaesong Industrial Complex in 2004, and full operations began in December that year when it started production. The firms tend to suffer when tensions are high on the Korean peninsula, and they were hit the hardest in 2013 when North Korea unilaterally shut down the complex for 5 months. However, despite such drawbacks, experts say cheap labor is an advantage that boosts the firm's competitiveness. And with half of the list of firms in the complex also logging double-digit growth rates in net profits, their performances stand out from the rest of the South Korean corporate sector. Recent data shows Korean companies reported an average of $5.5 of net profits on every $100 of sales last year. That's below the global average of $7.9. Korean firms' profitability also fell by nearly 3 percentage points in the past 3 years, the second worst corporate showing among 25 major economies. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The South Korean military will use more advanced technology in its equipment to enhance its defense posture. This is just part of its plan for mounting a creative national defense against the ever-present threat from North Korea. Our Kim Yeon-bin has this report.
Korea's defense ministry has laid out its plans for the year, with a focus on building a creative national defense. As part of the plan, the ministry plans to employ advanced technology to enhance its military capabilities and gain an edge over North Korea. The list of high-tech weaponry includes unmanned surface vehicles that will be capable of conducting offshore missions without jeopardizing the lives of military personnel. There are also plans to use robotics to boost surveillance capabilities on the front lines and equip soldiers with state-of-the-art gear. The ministry is seeking ways to better deal with Pyongyang's nuclear weapons development programs and to better fight North Korean troops, which outnumber the South roughly 2-1. Meanwhile, the ministry reiterated that it will proceed with a large-scale military exercise with the U.S. in March, despite the North's offer to suspend nuclear tests if the Allies halt the drill. The North sees the exercise as a rehearsal for war, while Korea and the U.S. say it is defensive in nature. During this year's drill, the two allies plan to strengthen their joint defense posture and set up a comprehensive plan to counter the communist regime's chemical and biological weaponry. The ministry said that maintaining a strong military posture of readiness guarantees a strong foundation for national defense and sets up a basis for a peaceful unification. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A young Korean man went missing in Turkey, and some fear he might have joined the Islamic State in Syria. Authorities in Korea say they have found pictures of Islamic State-related material on the teen's computer. Well, nothing has been confirmed yet, and Korean and Turkish authorities are first trying to find out where he might be. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Seoul's Foreign Ministry says the 18-year-old man surnamed Kim was last seen on January 10th after leaving a hotel in Kilis, a town that straddles the Turkey-Syria border. His disappearance came to light 2 days later when Kim's travel companion, a Korean national in his 40s, reported him missing to the Korean embassy in Ankara. A Turkish daily newspaper reported on Saturday that Kim had crossed the border into Syria to join the Islamic State militant group after exchanging emails with one of its members. Authorities in Seoul initially cast doubt on the allegations, saying they had found no substantive evidence he was in contact with IS. However, new clues have come to light. Police in Korea say they found some photos on the teenager's computer showing IS members holding rifles and the group's distinctive black flag. And an employee of the hotel where Kim was staying in Kilis reportedly said he was wearing an Islamic-style headscarf and was carrying a full backpack as he left the hotel. The hotel employee said he thought Kim might have been planning on going to Syria, explaining that the area is a common route that foreign fighters take to join the terror group. Authorities in Korea and Turkey are working in close coordination to try and locate the teenager. If confirmed, it would mark the first known case of a Korean national joining Islamic State. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And more on that story, we have reports coming in that authorities in Korea have found evidence that the missing teen spoke to someone in Turkey a number of times through a social networking service called SureSpot. SureSpot is a mobile messaging application that uses exceptional end-to-end encryption for every text, image, and voice message. We'll bring you more updates on this story as they come out. Moving on to other stories, the trial has begun for the woman behind the so-called nut rage incident on a Korean Air flight. The trial for Cho Hyun-ah, the former Korean Air vice president, began early this afternoon. The 40-year-old Cho faces a number of charges for violating aviation safety regulations, including assault on a plane and changing flight plans. She is also charged with interfering with a government official as she allegedly tried to use her influence in the investigation process. Cho's lawyer denies the charges. The case revolves around Cho's actions on a flight from New York City to Seoul early December, when Cho, apparently enraged over the lack of first-class service in her in-flight service, ordered a crew member to deplane right before takeoff, causing an 11-minute delay.
Move over juice and soda. For many Koreans, bottled water is becoming their favorite drink. With more Koreans choosing to stay healthy by drinking water over other beverages, the domestic bottled water market is also enjoying a boom.
That's right. This is going to make me sound really old, but I remember a time when people were having question marks all over their heads when they thought about paying money for water. But nowadays, you can even find trendy shops stocked with dozens of varieties of water, from sparkling to glacial, staffed with specially trained water experts that some might call sommeliers. So you can make your choice. Here's our Park Ji-won with this week's Industry Insight.
Korea's bottled water market is estimated to hit about $5.5 million in 2014. The market has almost quadrupled over the past 15 years, and last year alone it grew by some 10%. Currently, there are around 100 domestic brands of bottled water in Korea. But the hands-down top seller is Jeju Samdasu, the #1 brand for 16 years running. Let's take a look. Jeju Samdasu has been the invincible market leader since it was launched in the late 1990s. Produced and bottled by the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province Development Corporation, Jeju Samdasu racked up some $206 million in sales revenue last year, a market share of over 35%.
The reason for the continued support from Korean consumers is the unparalleled water quality. Jeju Island has one of the highest levels of precipitation in Korea. The rainfall permeates underground, forming vast groundwater resources. Jeju Island's volcanic rocks function as a natural filter, resulting in clean and naturally mineral-enriched water.
With Jeju's Hamdasu firmly in the lead, the competition for the number 2 spot has been fierce. As of the end of 2014, Baeksansu, a brand launched in 2012 by food and beverage conglomerate Nongsim, has taken the highly coveted second position with a 5.4% market share. While Korea's bottled water market grew about 10% last year, Baeksansu's revenue expanded over 30% from the previous year.
There are 3 conditions for good water resources: excellent water quality, a clean environment, and abundance of water. Baekdusan Mountain meets all 3 conditions, and that's why Baeksansu is bottled there.
With the growing interest in health and well-being in the nation, sales of bottled water have outpaced the sales of juice, which tends to contain sugar and artificial colors, for the first time. Now that water is one of the most popular beverages, consumers are developing a water palate and a flair for water and food pairings. And premium water bars like this, which sells over 100 bottled water brands, are gaining a foothold. At the bar, water sommeliers offer their advice about which types of water will best suit consumers' needs.
There are many types of bottled water, from glacial water to deep sea water to spring water. The taste depends on the mineral content and the water's pH. And now that drinking bottled water is now considered as a part of a health and beauty regimen, the market's growth is expected to accelerate in coming years.
Another fast-growing segment is sparkling water. While still in its infant stage, the fizzy drink has quadrupled its market share in just 5 years, and it's estimated to have reached some $32 million last year. And being that it accounted for about 70% of all imported bottled water in Korea, it's estimated to grow at an even faster rate than the still water market. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Korea's producer prices dropped for the 5th straight month in December, dipping to their lowest point in 4 years. The Bank of Korea says producer prices went down 0.9% last month from a month earlier. The index marked a 2% decline from the previous year. The central bank attributed the slide to falling global oil prices that dragged down prices of petroleum goods by more than 10% in December from a month ago. The data follows the central bank's cut in its inflation outlook for this year to 1.9%, and producer price index serves as a leading indicator for consumer prices.
Well, meanwhile, Korea's mobile advertising market is expected to top $925 million this year. That means it will account for 1/3 of the nation's total online advertising market. According to a report by local media firm DMC Media, the mobile advertising market will grow 27% compared to last year due to the growing number of smartphone users in the country. The report also reveals that more mobile advertisements will be in the form of animation, videos, and even real-time bidding this year. In addition, Korea's online advertising market is expected to grow 9% this year, topping $2.8 billion. Well, the future is looking very bright for startups in Korea.
And some even believe that Korea is set to become Asia's Silicon Valley in the coming years.
And it's not an exaggeration, and it doesn't hurt that the government is dishing out tens of billions of dollars in grants and other subsidies to foster startups.
And let's jump right into the first in our 5-part series on startups in Korea this week. Here's our Kwon So-ah.
Over the past 35 years, only 3 startups have made it to the top 100 companies in terms of market capitalization in Korea. The fact highlights that conglomerates still dominate the Korean economy. But there are signs the corporate landscape is changing. The number of startups in Korea has been breaking records in recent years, reaching nearly 30,000 last year. That's more than triple the number seen during the dot-com bubble from the late 1990s to the early 2000s. The number of serious investors has grown too. Almost $1.3 billion was poured into startups last year, marking a 27% rise from 3 years ago. The startup ecosystem has also strengthened with a rise in angel investors, accelerators, and networks. Startup Alliance, a joint effort between the government and private sector, for example, arranges special events to connect startups with potential partners and clients.
Compared to Canada, where I'm from, Korean government, a lot of Korean institutions providing a really good environment to the people who are preparing to start a business. For example, this kind of a meeting and providing really good information, and there are a lot of seminars.
Experts say the new startup wave is different from the previous boom when e-commerce was still a fledgling business and internet connections were clunky. Now, net access is instant and easy and, more importantly, mobile.
A lot of small startups, they're trying to connect some kind of services to the smartphone and more efficiently than existing offline businesses. So there will be a lot of new innovations on that front.
President Park Geun-hye wants startups to lead her administration's drive to transform Korea into a creative economy. She has vowed to cut through red tape and provide financial incentives to them. In line with this, the government has earmarked $92 billion this year to support small and mid-sized businesses, including startups. Getting off the ground is one thing, but turning startups into profitable businesses is another. Korea's #1 web portal Naver, one of the most successful startups that survived the dot-com crash, is also providing practical help. It's opening a startup accelerator this year in Seoul's version of Silicon Valley, the Taeheran Valley. That area will also house a government-led tech startup campus and the third Google campus in the world.
The success of startups is key to realizing the government's creative economy plan, which in turn is key to getting the economy back on its feet. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, here in Korea, we're not feeling the full wrath of winter so far these days, so that's good. But apparently we have some level of fine dust across the country.
That's right. And this bad air pollution has been going on for over a week now. So for details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for details. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. And as you said, June, the air quality hasn't been too good these days, and today the levels are getting better. But it's still looking bad over on Jeju Island and in the southern regions, while others are just normal. Now, on a day like this, it's best to stay indoors or wear a mask when you're going outside. Now, and those of you who are with asthma should use your inhalers often, even when you're inside. And try to follow these tips because they will help you keep from getting sick. Now, with that in mind, make sure to add another layer to that when you're heading outside tonight, because temperatures are expected to drop to -3 from the mild highs that we had today. Now to our readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Tuesday morning at -5 and gets up to 4 in the afternoon, while Daegu and Busan will reach higher at 8 and 9 degrees respectively. Now to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 9 as well, while Dokdo hits 5, while Mount Kumgang dips low to -2 degrees. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Well, that's all from us for now. Thank you for watching. And for those of you tuning in from Korea, good night and get home safe. I'm Lee Ji-yoon.
And I'm Daniel Che. To our viewers in different time zones, have a great start to your day. We'll be back with more same time tomorrow.